This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Sophie Brannon, co-founder of the Atlanta office of StudioHawk. Welcome to eCoffee with Experts.
Hey, Austin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk through everything with you.
There's a lot to talk through, and we actually met in person a month or two ago at the Ahrefs Evolve conference. Maybe it'd be a good place to start to tell the audience what your presentation was on stage at Ahrefs Evolve.
Yeah, definitely. So that presentation was all about AI workflows and how you can integrate that, not just kind of at the beginner level of kind of like content briefing and things like that, but all the way through to some of those more advanced workflows. So looking at looking at how you can integrate things into more of that C-suite level, looking at client management and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was very much a, hey guys, everyone's talking about AI, but this is how you can actually use it in some kind of fundamental ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about what it is, but there's few talking about, hey, these are the real how-to use cases step by step, because I think a lot of the times that's the secret sauce. And as you were saying beforehand, like there's a lot of charlatans that are coming up because with Lovable and Anyden and a couple of these, Replit or Cursor, like it's pretty easy to create a cool front end experience that looks very professional, and you can hide the back end, like your inexperience on the back end just by creating a front end UX that's approachable. I guess, where are you really finding like the separation, knowing that there are people who can mask themselves? Like, what's the separation on the back end of like what really makes an AI system or an AI workflow like positive, like net positive?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think a lot of companies are now finding this as a big challenge. Like when AI started coming in, it was very much, like, look at all of these ways we can automate everything. Like we don't need people anymore. Like we can just, use all of these systems and all of these workflows. And then they're finding that like further down the line, building a lot of these workflows and building a lot of these systems are either not being used. And that's a fun conversation, actually. Maybe we can have separately, but just like, being trialed, but not actually being used completely within the business, or it's taking them so long and so much time, so much money, so much effort to actually even get it rolled out properly across, especially a large organization to start with. So yeah, I feel like maybe we're possibly overcomplicating a lot of stuff just in the AI space generally. But there are some really cool use cases for it, like not just necessarily in SEO, but even just like in all kinds of businesses.
If I'm an agency owner, maybe I don't have a more than 100 person global agency like StudioHawk, but let's just say, I have my core team. I have like maybe 10 people on the team, and I'm just getting into AI, and I'm kind of in that position, like you said. It's like, okay, I've heard that it can automate everything and I can eliminate everybody from my team, but I also heard that I can keep my whole team and make them X more efficient. What's my first step as an agency owner to implement AI, whether through workflows or otherwise, that would create the biggest impact on my SEO agency?
I think finding those repetitive tasks that happen every single month or every single week, or whatever that looks like, and try and automate some of those. Like, for example, looking at, I don't know, a GA4 audit or something like that, that maybe you just need a quick checklist as a checklist exercise. Does it have tracking set up? Does it have, for example, an e-commerce site, is it pulling through revenue? Is it pulling through events? Like, what does that look like? You can more or less just set up an N8N workflow that then pulls into Google Sheets that then starts having that as a bit of a checklist. So that's already immediately saving time that maybe a junior or something like that is going in and looking at. So yeah, any kind of repetitive tasks, anything that the team is spending a lot of time on. And what I would say before we even get into the AI conversation is making sure you're actually tracking where people are spending that time. So then you can really like pinpoint where those time savings can be and really look at utilization across an agency. And then just like working backwards from there, really. Like, what is possible to automate? Is it going to take more time to try and set up that process than what it would do to do it manually? And then how you can roll that out in the future.
Man, the bane of existence is time tracking in small to medium sized agencies. Good Lord. Especially what?
Bringing it in later as well, rather than like from day one. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Is not a part of the employee onboarding SOPs. Like, hey, log into Timely and like track all this stuff. Do you have any recommendations for those that are listening of ways to track time? Like, is it just an app, or How are you guys doing it?
You can do it a whole bunch of different ways. We've trialed a whole bunch of things, not even necessarily just at StudioHawk, but at previous agencies that I've worked with as well. So it's integrated into a lot of project management systems now. So even like Monday.com, Right,
Mm,
I used previously. I loved that. That was like a great PM tool when I was working at my old agency. Or you can do it really super basic and use something like Clockify, where it's a completely free app and it's basically a calendar connection to your Google Calendar.
mm.
You're kind of putting in scheduling your tasks into your calendar. You can just copy paste it over because it doesn't need to be exact by the second. It just needs to give a good idea of like, what are clients like, who's the most profitable client, who's the least profitable client, especially more of that junior or mid-level employee, where are they
Mm.
spending too much of their time that we could possibly then look at automating via AI, or maybe we need to change our SOPs, or maybe we need more training. And it's kind of more looking at it from that sense, as opposed to, hey, we just need to oversee every single second that this person is doing. Like that's not helpful for anyone.
Yeah, it feels a bit micromanaged if it's at
Absolutely.
that level. Yeah, but from what I understand is at a basic level when you're time tracking and looking for opportunities for AI, you're basically looking for like where do we get the most leverage and like how can we increase the profit per client?
Exactly. 100%. It is looking at it from that sense, not necessarily, oh, we can get rid of X amount of people because we can automate all of these things. Because
Mhm.
one thing that AI can't do is that solid client relationship and that context. And maybe it will get better and maybe it's going to prove me wrong, but I just don't ever see that that is going to be something that's going to be replaced. Sure, you can look at, it can do technical audits, it can run CRO experiments in your sleep and do A/B tests and all this kind of stuff, which is incredible. But it also means that we can then provide more value to the client by getting more stuff done, sorry.
Mm.
And then just making sure that we are really leveraging that relationship building, that human connection. And that's something that AI I just never see replacing.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. I think there was a agency analytics report on 2025 like agencies that they surveyed and the top metric for retention of clients was that trusted relationship. And
Yeah.
it also goes back to reporting. So can you share what are you reporting to clients and like what does that reporting look like and then what metrics do you include in that report?
Yeah, so for us, we have like two kind of layers for the report. So every month, and it's always monthly reporting, you have a presentation. And within that presentation, it's only necessary a few slides, but kind of covering this is what we've done, this is what's coming next, and then key kind of campaign highlights, any
Mm,
challenges we want to address. For example, hey, Mr. Client, your dev team's not implementing anything we've said. Here's the repercussions of that. So really kind of making sure that that's obvious. But then also alongside that kind of key highlights, this is what we're doing, this is what's coming next, we also have a interactive dashboard that APIs through Google Analytics, Google Search Console, SEMrush or Ahrefs, depending on what we're using for keyword tracking and visibility, and then Google My Business if that's relevant. And then we will structure those dashboards depending on what metrics are most important to the client. And that really depends on who it is you're reporting into. So if you're reporting to someone at a C-suite level, for example, then ultimately all they care about is how much money is going in, how much money is coming out. SEO
mm.
is not exactly as simple as that in the same way like paid can be, but having and making sure you're reporting on the revenue, the conversions, what that looks like is vital. And as far as I'm concerned, should always be the core metric and KPI for any campaign. But then also looking at your traffic, but not just what's coming through organic search as a standard classification for GA4, also looking at what's coming through now from ChatGPT as referral traffic and other LLMs, and just kind of digging into some of that stuff a little bit more now. But the way we kind of integrate multiple tools and multiple channels just means that we have, like, rather than one source of truth, we're looking across the board to see what that kind of looks like. Because
Mm.
9 times out of 10, analytics is never set up correctly. Like, let's be honest. It's so important that we have different kind of variants that we can actually look at and then report back on that ROI.
Yeah. I love that. Keeping it simple for the client because they hire you for a reason. It's because they're not the expert. They're
Cool.
not they don't know all the tiny details. They're looking for the ROI. In terms of ROI, like what I suppose attribution is getting harder to track. What sort of metrics are like the top, let's say, three metrics that you're looking at in SEO for a campaign to be successful, show ROI? Like what is a client like happy about, and then what are you happy about? I guess in metrics.
Yeah, I think from my side, like the revenue bottom line is always going to be like the easiest indicator to say, hey, like you're spending, say, 2, 3, 4, 5K a month, and you're
Hmm.
100K a month back in revenue. Like, that doesn't necessarily align with profit, which is the one friction point there. And your GA4, unless you've got that set up as like an estimated profit, which some of our clients have, and it's something that we kind of work with our clients on so we can really see those actual true numbers, but just making sure you have some form of visibility there. And that's kind of very specific to ecom. If we're looking more at the lead gen side of things, it gets very difficult then, because we can see how many forms have been completed or how many phone calls they're getting per month across all channels, but you don't know how many of those are real kind of MQLs. So that's something that you also need to have that conversation, have that back and forth with the client. And I think that's something where a lot of agencies, or even just like a lot of account managers, a lot of SEO specialists, don't necessarily take that next step, because they may just not have that commercial awareness. Like, not every SEO is going to be thinking about how profitable a campaign is. They're like, oh, traffic's gone up, keyword rankings, yay. And like,
Hmm.
that's been the embedded, this is the metrics that are important. But as attribution does get harder, having that commercial awareness is only going to get more and more important. So we need to be having those conversations and being like, okay, every single month, can you also share with us, the quality of the leads that are coming through? Because we could be reporting, say, you've got 100 leads, so that's up 20%, 30% year on year. Great. But actually, if the quality is really poor because the content doesn't quite align with the target audience or whatever that kind of looks like, we need to be aware of that. And those conversations don't typically happen until a client's then unhappy and they're trying to hand in notice. So if you can those conversations right up front to start with, have a system in place to be like, hey, like, let's look at, quality of leads coming through. Now, there's only so much of that we can control. And also, there's only so much in terms of how much closes that we can control, because
Hmm.
we're a sales team. We're just delivering the numbers, right? We're delivering the leads. So there has to be some caveat to that. But if we have some visibility on that quality as well, that's always going to be important.
Yeah, I love that. Setting up expectations, setting up a back and forth cycle. I would imagine that happens when you're doing the monthly reporting, where you're also asking feedback from them, like, how was this month? How were the MQLs? Can you? This is it's funny and it's personal to me. Can you define MQL for me? Like, how does StudioHawk say, all right, this is a marketing qualified lead, and who is in charge of that definition?
I mean, I think it varies per client, to be honest. And that's where it gets really difficult, because what we may see as a lead, so for example, the form fill has come through. We're like, great, that's a new MQL. But if the
Yeah.
quality that's not good, or it's a spam lead, because we get them on our own website where people are just like, I don't know, spamming our forms for some unknown reason. It
Yeah.
happens. Then that's where that back and forth conversation needs to happen of like, what is a legitimate lead? And those parameters can be defined pretty much from onboarding, of like, to speaking to the client, what does a good lead look like to you? And we can even break that down further of, okay, what's an A plus lead, an A lead, a B lead, a C lead? And you can kind of have that segmentation. And that can be
Mm.
based on how much they're willing to spend. It could be based on business size. Like I say, it varies per client and what they're kind of really looking for. But yeah, setting that up from day one and then
Mhm.
having that tracked ongoing is going to just be absolutely vital for a lot of
Mm.
people.
It's not what I was looking for, Sophie. I wish you would just say, like, this is what an MQL is, and it's the same across all clients.
You didn't say it depends. I really tried hard to avoid that.
I know. Oh my gosh. Speaking of, it depends. We're talking about getting right, more traffic. We're excited about, the client's excited about that. But, to your point, it might not be the right traffic. How are you using AI to reflect back and adjust campaigns, to create different content, to create different targeting? Is there a key, like, workflow? Is there a key tool that you're using to accept feedback and iterate?
I think really the deep research side of things is super useful, because you can plug that in. So you can plug the feedback into, I prefer Gemini for this, but plug that
Mm.
into Gemini's deep research. And you can use other LLMs to do the same thing and be like, you know, this is the campaign so far. This is the strategy so far. This is what we've got queued up for the next 3 to 6 months. This is the feedback on the MQLs that have been coming in so far. Like, how can we improve this?
Mm.
Now, what it spits out may be great, but it needs that human kind of review of it to make sure it does actually align with what those expectations are. I think the other side of it as well is making sure we're not jumping on some of that too quickly, because
Mm.
if, for example, that feedback is coming in like month 2, month 3, and they're like, oh, we're not happy with the leads that are coming in. It's like, cool, but maybe a lot of our work hasn't actually had an impact yet. So that's something
Mm.
else we need to kind of consider. But any kind of form of deep research, even just for ideating and coming up with new the target audiences. Like I love to use it to really pinpoint a content strategy and be like, what are, here's some competitors, here's the client's website. What are other kind of avenues we can go down from a content strategy? What are these people's target audiences actually reading, actually looking for at all different stages of the funnel, top, middle, bottom, and then kind of building it out like that.
I remember one of your slides at Ahrefs because I was in the room and I like make sure to take some pictures. You were sharing some custom GPTs, and I don't know, I think they were available just on the ChatGPT, marketplace. One was a content helpfulness and quality SEO analyzer, and there was another one that I'm looking at, the on-page SEO audit. Are those, I guess how are you implementing those? Are you implementing those with each client? Does it vary? I'm sure it does, but when are you using those sort of custom GPTs?
Normally from around month one, when we're trying to build out the strategy and highlight some of those key opportunities. And one
Mm,
thing I would say about a lot of those custom GPTs, they're very repetitive. So they will typically pull out the
mm,
same things, even if those things are not relevant.
mm,
But that's also something to be wary of. Again, it always needs that kind of human review. A lot of these custom GPTs as well were set up previously and haven't been touched since. So that's, again, something
mm.
to look, especially when custom GPTs first became a thing and everyone was super excited. It was like, let's build all these new things. But it gives a really good benchmark, like, throw it in, throw the client's website in, get some feedback, then just cross-reference it. And then sometimes it can pull up some hidden gems.
Nice. Yeah, I love that you're implementing that like pretty much right away, like
Mhm.
throwing it in there and finding opportunities right away. I can imagine how much more efficient that can make your team, especially well, tell me a little bit more about what the use cases for AI that you guys are using internally on the individual contributor level, whether that's, like an SEO specialist or a customer success person versus the C-suite or, the general managers.
Yeah, great question. So, from a kind of individual contributor perspective, some of the things I've been looking at is, content briefs. So, before like LLMs came out and they were really like being used properly, a content brief and putting that together and doing the research and building that all out would probably take like at least an hour to get done. But
Mm,
now, especially once you have that template in place, like you know who the competitors are, you know the general structure of the page because most are like templated anyway. For example, a Shopify collection page, it looks the
mm,
same across all of the collections and things like that. You can build out a content brief really, really quickly. So that's a great way to do it. Same as, like I say, using deep research to highlight maybe some content strategy ideas and all of these kind of things. And what that means is that they typically can get a lot of work done faster and more work done in the month. And I think that's where there's a very fine line with a lot of agencies because some will see it as a way to make campaigns more profitable because they
mm,
can do the same amount of work with less time. And then they're like, great. Whereas we're seeing it from another perspective of actually that means we can get things done faster and get our clients results a lot quicker. So
mm.
things might have had to wait until month 2, month 3, month 4 can now start being brought forward a little bit because we're saving time in some of these other areas. So I think that's really important. And then from more of a C-suite level, we're looking at it more in terms of how we can add automations and different elements to some of our oversight. So
Mm,
one thing we're looking at is looking at client sentiment and customer sentiment analysis and integrating that within HubSpot. So whenever we get kind of client emails come through, if there's a email that comes across with somewhat kind of mid-range to negative sentiment, then the general manager will then, or the team leader, whoever that is in terms of structure, will then get notified of that. So then we can get a kind of jump on the fire before it's a fire kind of situation.
mm.
And a lot of the times it comes through and actually it's fine and it's just the way that someone types because I've definitely had that experience, especially working with corporates where you just get a general miserable email and then you jump on a call and everyone's fine and everything's great. But it does give us that kind of insight a little bit sooner. And especially as a larger agency, like not so much in the US because we're a pretty small team here at the moment, but in Australia, for example, where we've got 80, 90 people and we don't have as much oversight on different kind of levels because it's so much hierarchy there.
Mm,
It just gives us that insight rather than waiting for that to become a problem. We
mm.
already have like that an idea that something's going on and we can jump in and fix it sooner.
I love that. On the IC level, it's more about the tactics and the strategies. In the higher up you go, it's more about human relationships and human management and everything like that, which also goes back to trust, which is becoming more and more important when AI is becoming more and more prolific. So with SEO, there's like three stool legs, I suppose. You have the on-page content, which can a lot of the times be supplemented by AI. We have these language models that are very good at writing. Then you have the technical slash schema and site hierarchy. There are certain aspects where AI can help with that in looking at the coding of the website.
Mhm.
But there's the third leg, which is the offsite authority. We're looking at link building and building trust that way. How are you guys thinking about link building in the post AI world? Is there something that changed? Like, what's your outreach look like? Just give me an overall perspective of how you're thinking about offsite authority.
Yeah, great question. So I think from an outreach perspective, it can speed up a lot of things like a lot of the templates and things like that, and like automating some of those processes. So that's been really kind of handy, especially when we're looking at kind of link acquisition at scale. I
Hmm.
think from if we dig into some of this more of the digital PR and citation acquisition and things like that, I found it's been really helpful pulling through lists of directories and places where our customer or our clients should be being referenced and they're not. So that's been really handy. So for example, if we plug in one of our client names, we're like, hey, like where are we not being referenced across like everywhere? And you can look from like a backlink gap analysis perspective and all of those kind of things as well, using Ahrefs, SEMrush, whatever that looks like. But even just pulling up like small localized directories that would be a really solid link or citation because it's hyper relevant and that's actually where a lot of their customers are, that's been a really kind of good identifier. And then from a digital PR perspective, there's a lot going on in that space from an AI kind of capability and just like what people are talking about. And there's been some instances where some digital PR agencies have just fully leveraged AI and gone too far the other way.
Hmm.
And that's led to like lots of journalists just receiving loads and loads and loads of emails all at once and all of that kind of happening, which I mean, link acquisition at scale, maybe that works and it might work for some agencies, but it does tend to backfire pretty quickly. It's from what I've seen in my experience and a lot of the backlash that we've seen online as well, with how a lot of this is happening. But one thing we can do is the ideation process, like think of other ideas because you end up so pigeonholed into, a particular client's website that you've been looking at for weeks or months or whatever that looks like. You kind of just get to the point where you're like, I literally have run out of ideas. So the ideation process, AI is brilliant for, and even just like refining templates. So we're obviously in Australia, we're in London, we're in America. Everyone speaks English. Everyone speaks English very differently in
Yeah,
like
yeah.
those three regions, right? So if we've got a press release that we're then like, okay, we've got this client, we need global coverage, rather than having to manually rewrite that entire press release and make sure you've got your Z's rather than your S's and
Yeah.
you cut U's and all this kind of stuff, that can all be done in a really automated fashion. So where that used to take a lot of time, a lot of kind of resource, a lot of energy, and often a lot of mistakes, because if you're not an American and writing American English, like it gets very
Hmm.
difficult. So, that kind of really helps as well. So like, yeah, there's just endless possibilities really in terms of just speeding things up, making things just kind of more consistent, I think, and then doing things a little bit more at scale. But again, you just have to be so careful with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to trust. If you're writing a press release in the U.S., but you're using the U's where they're not supposed to be because you're from London, but we don't use them here in the United States. Yeah, it does go back to trust,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Like to your point, when we're reaching out to journalists, they're looking for trust. It's awesome to have those relationships. I'm curious if you have some contrarian take that you're seeing other agencies do, or even brands like try and do and try and emulate, where you're like, I can see why you're doing that, but like you're doing it the wrong way. Is there any like hot take that you have in terms of SEO, link building, outreach?
I think the main thing I've seen is where just like complete AI model has been built, and that AI model is then doing all of the outreach and trying to build fake relationships and things like
Mm,
that.
hmm.
Press releases are all kind of going through it without any human oversight. It's being absolute just kind of spam to the journalists. I think it's not going to end well for the entire industry if that keeps happening, because the pool of journalists is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, where a lot of newspapers are cutting staff and things like that. And that is kind of a really difficult thing to navigate anyway. And then if we layer on top just a load of spam stuff coming through, press releases that aren't relevant, but they're like, we just need to kind of spread as far and wide as we can. And with our media lists, because we just need links. Okay, we're KPI'd on links, whatever that looks like, you know,
Mm.
that gets really difficult. And then I think the other side is, the KPIing on links side of
Mm.
things, I think is going to start changing and evolving pretty rapidly. Not just for digital PR, but I think generally for SEO, because citations have so much more value, brand mentions have so much more value in the realm of AI search. So actually holding some value there as well. So like not even necessarily just looking at you need a follow link. I was going to say do follow, but that's just not a thing. Follow link you need from this DR website. It has to have this much traffic and all those kind of key metrics. I think we're going to start seeing a shift where that does start to be less of a client demand. Whether that
Mm.
becomes a less important factor is a different story. I still think
Mhm.
that holds a lot of value for an SEO campaign in all kind of areas of SEO. But I think that a lot of clients are going to start being less picky about these kind of metrics and things like that.
If they're being less picky about these metrics, are those metrics being replaced by something else? And how do you KPI the replacement of citation or link building metrics when like you have metrics of DR and traffic and like they're very obvious and you're saying like maybe those the DR might not hold as much weight, the traffic might not hold as much weight. Like how do we gauge the quality of a placement, whether that be a link or something else?
Yeah, I think relevancy is just starting to have its era now.
Mm.
Totally does depend on who it is you're kind of getting links for.
Mhm.
There are industries where, doing digital PR is just never going to work for them because it just doesn't. Like, journalists don't want to link out to casinos and things like this, right?
Yeah.
In those kind of industries, the traditional form of link building, paid link building, and all of that still works incredibly well. And from what I've been reading on LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that, they're saying actually we're back in 2010 SEO realms and it is working
Yeah.
uh, amazingly, especially for those kind of industries. So that's super interesting.
Mm.
Do I The problem with DR and DA and whatever it is you want to call it is that it's always been a very easy to manipulate metric to start with,
Yeah.
especially domain authority. Domain rating with Ahrefs is less easily manipulated. Authority score of SEMrush, same thing. But that being said, it still isn't a 100% accurate metric. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, from a digital PR perspective, relevancy is always going to be one of the most important things. The type of publication we typically will like categorize things as like a tier one, a tier two. The tier ones being like the New York Times and things like that. Tier two maybe being more of a lower kind of level local regional paper or something like that, or like kind of some form of magazine. I think the relevancy will be important. I think one thing we're looking at, I think we have changed it now, is rather than KPIing on links, whether that's a follow or no follow, because the digital PR standard is, not all newspapers and most newspapers have rules in place where they won't give you a follow link.
Mm.
But looking at brand mentions and building out more of a point system. So if you get a brand
Mm.
mention on a citation, for example, you get 0.5 out of 1 in terms of like a link would be 1, a brand mention would be zero point 0.5, and then you need to hit as many points as we can, and we kind of build it out like that instead. So yeah, like
Mm.
do I think the metrics are going to be replaced? No, I think there's always going to be a very big segment of people who still look at DA, DR, authority score, whatever that looks like, follow links still being important, especially in very niche kind of industries. But I think we're going to start seeing more focus around relevancy. Definitely.
What I love, just based on this conversation, is I noticed that the way maybe it's from the founders and how they think and how they trickle that mindset down, but it seems like you're very big on segmentation and saying like this is a plus, a B, or whatever, tier one, tier two, tier three, and it seems like that sort of segmentation is I don't hear it a lot, I guess. So where does that mindset come from? I guess what I'm asking is like how important is it to segment that deep when it comes to just SEO in general? I mean, seems like you're one of the only agencies that's doing it that deep.
Yeah, I think for us, it's just worked really well because it means we can really allocate resourcing in the best way. So even our clients, like we all bracket them as A plus, A, B based on spend, for example. So then we know,
Hmm.
okay, for an A plus, we need X amount of enterprise managers or a senior SEO specialist or whatever that is looking after that. Whereas for kind of a lower budget client, then maybe you don't need that kind of enterprise level because chances are they don't need that much time, resource, and kind of all of that to be put in. So for us, it's worked really well. And it's kind of come more just from learning how things work. StudioHawk's 10 years
Hmm.
old, made mistakes along the way and we've learned from that. I'm in a very fortunate position in the US where, we've come in as StudioHawks of 9 years old and the processes and the structure and all of that is already in place and the mistakes have already been made. So I'm like, great, this is awesome. Like bringing this out to
Yeah.
the market, super, super lucky. But yeah, I think, having more of a granular focus and a granular process a lot of the time can just help you to structure how things should be moving forward. And like that kind of granular level may not work for everyone. It works for us because we are such a large agency. For smaller agencies, maybe you just have the same kind of process that goes along with everyone. Like the way we onboard an A+ client, for example, is slightly different to how we would onboard maybe a B or a C client, more so with, what we dig into, what they get in their month one because they're paying a higher retainer, therefore more hours, right? So
Mm.
yeah, it works. It works well for us in terms of segmenting everything down. May not work for everyone, but it's something that we've kind of picked up along the way as a way for us to just resource things correctly, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good caveat that it may not work that way for everyone, but man, again, going back to the whole trust thing and like who is a client going to choose? Are they going to choose someone that is contextual and relevant to their business, like an agency that's contextual and relevant to their agent or their business? Or are they going to choose, the generalist? So, yeah, kudos to you. Being conscious of time as we wrap up here, Sophie, what is like one maybe undervalued trend or undervalued aspect of agency life, SEO, marketing? Like, what's something that you see other agencies sleeping on that you're really going to lean into in 2026?
I think our main thing is it's really the whole way we've built StudioHawk, to be honest, in terms of like our core USPs. And that's the fact that we don't have account managers. We are direct to SEO specialists. So
Mm,
the person who the client will talk to is the person who leads the strategy, is doing the work in the back end of the website, is liaising with the content writer who sits 2 desks away from them. And that's
mm,
something that has been at the heart of StudioHawk from day one, and it always will be. I think another thing for us as well is we get told a lot that we should niche down into specific industries and specific kind of areas like that. And it's something that I don't think we're ever going to do,
mm,
simply because it's not something we've ever had to do, especially in Australia. Like we're arguably the biggest SEO agency in Australia, one of the most well known out there, and we've never niched down. So a
hmm.
lot of agencies do, and I do understand and see the value and why they would, because especially from what I've seen in the US so far is a lot of people have, if you do really well in health and you have a few solid case studies, they're going to refer you to their friends also in health, and then you have
Yeah.
more case studies and everything builds out. But for us, having more exposure to broader industries gives us more opportunity to play around with different things, figure out how algorithms work differently in different niches, and it's just something I don't think we're ever going to change. So yeah, direct to
Yeah.
specialist and not niching, I think, is probably our kind of secret sauce that's not so secret.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, a little bit contrarian there, like you mentioned, especially in the US. Like there is a big push to niche down and like become the authority in the space. But man, I think that cross pollination brings the sort of competitive advantage that you don't get if you're niching down. Well, yeah, pros and cons to each. And I really like that you specify there are caveats. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for us. Very cool. Sophie Brannon, thank you for being here. Where can we learn more about you and about StudioHawk online?
Yeah, I guess the best place is probably LinkedIn. So you can follow me or follow the StudioHawk main page there, or visit us at studiohawk.com. If you're ever in Atlanta as well, just hit me up. Always happy to host people and show them around the city. It's a great city. And yeah, like super excited to touch base with people.
Awesome. And yeah, I hope the audience does do that because meeting you in person, you're an awesome person to talk to. I thought you gave an amazing presentation at Ahrefs, and thank you so much for bringing that experience here in a more intimate setting. It was really cool to have you.
No, it's been great. And thank you so much for the invitation, Austin. It's been awesome.
Cheers.